Daniel Everett sat in the silence of his office, his eyes fixed on the mountain of complaints strewn across his mahogany desk. The words blurred together. Long wait times, rude staff, chronic understaffing. Each report whispered a quiet warning, a silent scream that something was deeply wrong. 7 years ago, he had taken a leap of faith and purchased the struggling restaurant chain. Through grit and vision, he turned it into a thriving business. But now, that success felt hollow, like a polished frame around a cracked painting. Something had shifted, and not in a good way. He rubbed his temples, trying to silence the storm inside his head. Craig, his district manager, had given him the usual reassurances. Everything's under control. That phrase had become a reflex, an empty placeholder. Every time Daniel pressed for details, Craig gave him the same vague promises. We're handling it. But handling it how? Daniel wasn't the kind of CEO who watched from a tower. He was a builder, not just a buyer. When he bought the chain, he'd worked shoulder to shoulder with cooks, memorized family recipes, listened to dishwashers talk about dreams they barely believed in. But somewhere along the way, growth had created distance. Distance from the heartbeat of the business. That needed to change. With a heavy breath, he made a decision that would alter everything. He would go undercover, not as Daniel Everett, CEO, but as Danny, the new hire. No titles, no expectations, just a plain black t-shirt, jeans, a ball cap, and a carefully disheveled beard. He'd start with the store that had the most complaints and quietly work his way through all 6 in the district. A week later, he stood outside the restaurant's smudged glass doors. It was a place he technically owned, but suddenly felt foreign to. His glasses fogged slightly in the humidity, his heart pulsing with an unexpected mix of nerves and resolve. Inside, the first thing that hit him wasn't the noise. It was the energy, or rather, the lack of it. The atmosphere was heavy, strained like a wire pulled too tight. Chaos ruled the kitchen, and the front counter was painfully understaffed. The few workers who were there looked like they were running on fumes, not hope. "Hey, you the new trainee?" a tall man said without lifting his gaze from the register. He had deep shadows under his eyes, like sleep was a luxury he hadn't known in weeks. "Yeah, that's me," Daniel replied, his voice low and even. "I'm Josh, shift manager," the man muttered. "We're short today. Watch and try to keep up." Short was an understatement. 3 employees were trying to manage a full lunch rush, their movements frantic, their patience threadbare. Orders piled up, and customers grew visibly agitated. Josh barked like a drill sergeant drowning in orders. "Move faster, Emily," he snapped at a teenage girl working the fryer. Her hands trembled as she dropped baskets of fries into bubbling oil. "I'm trying," she said, her voice cracking under the weight of pressure. Sweat ran down her temple as she pushed through each motion like it might be her last. Nearby, a boy who looked no older than 16 leaned heavily against the counter. "Man, I've been here since 6. No break, no food. This is nuts." "You don't get to complain, Caleb." Josh turned on him like a live wire. "You think I'm not tired too?" Caleb's jaw tensed. "Yeah, but I'm not even supposed to be on this long. You keep calling people off. We've got no backup." Daniel's gut twisted. A miner working a shift like that, with no rest? It wasn't just negligent, it was illegal. Before anyone could speak, a customer slammed her hand on the counter. "I've been waiting 20 minutes. Josh rolled his eyes. "Emily, where's order 23? "I think I messed up the fries," she stammered. "I'll redo them." Josh threw his arms up. "Unbelievable! Can't any of you get anything right?" Emily's face crumbled. She dumped the fries, her hands shaking. It was more than just a mistake. It was shame. Pure, undiluted shame. Daniel stepped closer to Caleb. You really haven't had a break since 6? Caleb blinked, surprised that anyone cared enough to ask. No, I've tried. Josh keeps saying we're too busy. Daniel clenched his jaw. This wasn't a one-time crisis. It was a broken system, one built on pushing kids past their limits and calling it just business. He took a deep breath, forcing the fury back down. He wasn't here to blow his cover, not yet. He needed to see more. But his heart was already breaking for what he'd built and what it had become. Daniel stayed in character, but one thing had crystallized in his mind. This couldn't go on, not under his name, not under any name. He kept working through the chaos, every moment searing itself into his memory. The kitchen was a battlefield of exhaustion. Employees moved like shadows, weighed down by fatigue, their steps uncertain, their energy drained. Every delayed order felt like another blow to morale, and the air was thick with tension ready to snap. He couldn't take his eyes off Emily and Caleb. Emily's eyes darted around the fryer, sweat streaking her pale face as she juggled more than her share. Caleb looked like he was running on pure adrenaline, his face pale, his hands trembling every time he reached for something. They were kids, being forced to carry the weight of a failing system. And then, Todd arrived. He emerged from the back office like a storm front in human form. His manager uniform was crisp, his spine stiff, and his expression unreadable, like a mask carved from stone. His name tag glinted under the fluorescence. What's going on out here? Todd's voice sliced through the kitchen noise like a blade. Josh turned to him, eyes flaring with frustration. We're drowning out here. I've told you over and over we need more people, but you keep cutting shifts. Todd's face didn't even twitch. Labor costs are too high. We have to make do. Daniel watched as Caleb's body stiffened, his fists clenched tight against his sides. So, we just work until we pass out? Caleb's voice cracked, sharp and bitter. Todd barely looked at him. You're still on the clock, aren't you? If you don't like it, you know where the door is. Emily paused, her face ghostly pale. We don't have a choice. If we leave, everything falls apart. Todd crossed his arms, indifferent. That's how jobs work. If you can't handle the heat, maybe this isn't for you. Daniel felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. This wasn't mismanagement. This was abuse. Cold, calculated neglect. Todd wasn't overwhelmed. He was callous. A man who viewed exhaustion not as a warning sign but as weakness. Caleb's voice shook. I'm supposed to be in school tomorrow. I haven't eaten since 6. Todd didn't blink. Clock out if you need to, but don't expect many hours next week if you leave during a rush. Emily froze. Her hands tightened around the fryer basket, her eyes filling with something between fear and defeat. That was the moment Daniel stepped forward, calm, controlled, but his heart thundered like a drum. So if someone hits their breaking point, they'd just lose their hours? Todd turned, finally taking full notice. Who are you? New trainee, Daniel replied coolly, just trying to understand how this place operates. Todd narrowed his eyes. It's simple. We run a business, not a daycare. People either do their jobs or they don't. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. And if they burn out in the process? Todd scoffed. Then they weren't cut out for this industry. Caleb shook his head slowly, his voice low. That's messed up. Todd snapped, watch your tone. Daniel felt the weight of it all, the exhaustion, the fear, the buried frustration rising to the surface. He turned to Josh. How long has it been like this? Josh hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously to Todd. Josh, Daniel said, firmer now. How long? Josh swallowed hard. Since Todd took over the district, Daniel's stomach dropped. Craig had sworn the district was running like clockwork. But this wasn't efficiency. This was collapse hidden beneath a thin layer of corporate polish. Todd bristled. "You're not here to ask questions. You're here to work." Daniel's voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. "Actually, I am here to ask questions." Todd's eyebrows lifted. "Oh yeah? Why's that?" Daniel exhaled deeply, then reached up and removed his glasses. "Because I own this company." Silence, like the entire restaurant had stopped breathing. Emily froze, her hands still on the fryer. Caleb's eyes went wide. Josh's face drained of color. And Todd turned ghost white. "Lord." Todd whispered, his voice dry. "I'm Daniel Everett," Daniel said, steady and unflinching. "And I've just spent the last few hours watching my employees be overworked, threatened, and mistreated. Under your watch." Todd opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked to Josh, seeking backup. But Josh looked away, his shoulders sagging. Caleb let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "No way." Emily looked like she was still trying to make sense of what just happened. Daniel stepped closer. "You've been cutting shifts, forcing miners to work illegal hours, and using their livelihoods to threaten silence." Todd's voice was tight. "I was following directives." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Who told you to run things this way?" Todd hesitated. "Craig?" And there it was. The truth, finally laid bare. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his side. Craig, the man he trusted, had been orchestrating this rot behind the scenes. "You're done here, Todd," Daniel said. "Effective immediately." Todd's face twisted. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," Daniel said. "You've created a toxic culture that puts lives at risk. I'm not letting that continue." Todd didn't argue. He turned and walked toward the back office in silence. The room didn't cheer. It didn't need to. The silence was louder than celebration. Daniel turned to Caleb. "You should never have been in that position. That ends now." Caleb stared at him, stunned. "You really mean that?" "I do," Daniel said with quiet conviction. Emily's voice trembled. "What happens now?" Daniel turned to her. "Now, I make things right." He stood there, in the heart of a broken system, the tension still heavy in the air. Employees exchanged glances, hopeful but unsure. No one moved. No one spoke. Until finally Josh cleared his throat. "So, what happens next?" Daniel looked around at the faces of those who had held this place together, even when it was falling apart. He had come undercover to find the truth. Now he was going to rebuild everything from the ground up. There was no returning to the comfort of his office, no pretending things were merely bumps in the road. Daniel had seen too much, and now that the truth was in front of him, there was only one way forward. "We're going to fix this," he said, his voice steady as stone. "Starting now." Josh raised an eyebrow, arms crossed skeptically. "With all due respect, sir, we've heard that before. Every time we speak up, we get nods and promises, and then nothing changes." Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer, meeting Josh's guarded stare. "That's why I came here myself," he said. "I needed to see the truth, not read it through sugar-coated reports. I wanted to hear it from the people who live it." Emily, who had stayed silent since the moment Daniel revealed his identity, finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, does that mean we actually get help? Or are we just supposed to keep pushing until we break?" Daniel turned to her, the weight of responsibility thick in his chest. "You shouldn't have to push through like this. Not ever. No one should. This isn't what a workplace should feel like. This isn't leadership. It's survival. And that ends here." Caleb, still uncertain, rubbed his tired hands together. "So what are you actually gonna do?" Daniel didn't take offense. He welcomed the question. Trust wasn't owed. It was earned, action by action. First, I'm bringing in more staff, starting immediately. No more running on skeleton crews just to hit budget targets. He turned to Josh. You said Todd was the one pushing shift cuts. Josh nodded. Yeah. He said corporate wanted better numbers. He told us to do more with less. So we did. Until we couldn't anymore. Daniel's jaw tightened. That ends today. Emily shifted her weight, her voice uncertain but hopeful. And what about breaks? We're told we can take them, but the second we try, it's guilt trips and glares. Daniel's eyes darkened. Breaks aren't favors. They're required by law, and if any manager is manipulating you out of taking them, they won't be managers for long. Caleb gave a dry, skeptical laugh. I'll believe it when I see it. Daniel didn't blame him. These kids had been burned before. You will, he promised. Because I'm not leaving until I see the change myself. Josh blinked. Wait, you're staying? Like here? Daniel rolled up his sleeves, a quiet fire in his eyes. Consider this my new office. Emily's eyes widened. You're serious? I didn't come to play the hero and disappear. I came to rebuild, from the ground up. The crew stood frozen, unsure how to process it. For so long they had felt invisible, and now the man who owned it all was standing shoulder to shoulder with them. So, what do we do now? Josh asked. Daniel looked around the restaurant. Now? We finish this shift, but from this moment forward, no more being short-staffed. I'll bring in people myself if I have to. Josh nodded slowly. All right, let's do this. Something shifted in the air. For the first time in a long while, hope flickered behind tired eyes. The team returned to their stations, not with energy, but with purpose. Daniel didn't just watch, he worked. He took orders, filled drinks, dropped baskets into fryers. He jumped on the line, answered phones, and wiped down counters. He moved like a man trying to wash away years of neglect with every action. By dinner rush, Daniel had already made the call. Extra staff from other locations arrived, and the mood lifted like a storm, finally breaking. Orders flowed, customers smiled, and for the first time, no one was drowning. Emily leaned against the counter, a soft breath escaping her lips. I forgot what it feels like to not be completely overwhelmed. Across the room, Caleb sat in the break area, his first real break all day, with a hot meal in front of him. This doesn't even feel real. Daniel joined him, pulling up a chair. This should be the baseline, not the miracle. Caleb stared at him, eyes searching. You really didn't know this was going on? Daniel didn't dodge the question. No. I trusted people to do the right thing, and I let that trust blind me. That's my fault. Caleb poked at his food. You're the owner. Shouldn't you have seen it sooner? I should have, Daniel said without flinching, and I take full responsibility. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere until this changes for good. Caleb looked away, then slowly nodded. Guess we'll see. Daniel didn't take it personally. He didn't expect faith, but he would earn it, one shift at a time. The night wore on, and Daniel kept working and calling. He contacted corporate. He began drafting new hiring policies, break regulations, and management training protocols. And before the doors closed, he had already scheduled a mandatory meeting for all district managers. Change wouldn't just start here. It would echo across every location he owned. By closing, the crew was tired, but not broken. They stood taller, spoke louder. It was a beginning. As he packed up to leave, Emily approached him again. Are you really going to follow through on all this? Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. Yes. And if anyone tells you otherwise, call me directly. She studied him for a long beat, then gave a small nod. All right, Caleb crossed his arms. Guess we'll hold you to that. Daniel smiled. Good, that's what I want. As he stepped into the night air, the weight of the day followed him. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man trying to protect a business. He felt like a leader again, a real one. The next morning, Daniel walked into the corporate office with steel in his spine. No hesitation, no distractions. The moment had come to dismantle the rotten framework and build something worthy. Craig was already in the conference room, casually leaning back, unaware of the storm about to hit. Heard you made a surprise visit, Craig said, smirking. Would have been nice to get a heads up. Daniel sat across from him, calm but unreadable. Would it? Or would you have just swept everything under the rug until I left? Craig shifted but tried to play it off. Come on, you know fast food's rough, things get chaotic, it's just the nature of the business. Daniel let silence fill the room. Then he spoke. A 16-year-old was forced to work a full shift without a break. He was threatened with losing hours if he clocked out. A teenage girl was berated in front of customers, and all of it was sanctioned by your district manager. Craig's smile faded. Look, I trust my managers to make the right calls. You know how tight labor budgets are. Daniel's voice dropped to a cold, deliberate calm. You call this smart? Slashing staff so deep that minors are breaking laws just to keep up? That's not strategy. That's negligence. Craig sat up straighter. Okay, I get it. You're upset. Maybe things got out of hand, but let's be real. These kids, they complain a lot. They always do. It's just part of the job. Daniel's fingers curled against the edge of the table. That's the last time I'll hear that excuse from you. This isn't about charity. It's about building a company that doesn't chew up kids and spit them out. Craig exhaled, frustrated. What do you want me to say? Sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I'll talk to Todd, we'll make a few changes. No need to overreact. You're done, Daniel interrupted, his tone final. Craig blinked. Wait. What? I'm firing you, effective immediately. Craig let out a nervous laugh, searching for a sign this was a joke. You're serious? Daniel didn't blink. You allowed a culture of fear, overwork, and abuse to flourish, and you defended it. That's not leadership. That's failure. Daniel's voice was calm, but laced with iron. You didn't just fail as a leader, Craig. You lied to me, over and over. You painted over rot with false numbers and empty promises. And the worst part, you sat in that chair and acted like none of it mattered. Like those kids didn't matter. Craig leaned forward, his tone dropping into a low threat. You fire me, and you'll have a real mess on your hands. I know this business inside and out. Daniel didn't flinch. Then I'll clean up the mess you made. There was a long pause before Craig finally stood, his bravado draining into disbelief. You're making a mistake. Daniel didn't bother responding. Some people weren't worth another breath. As soon as Craig left, Daniel moved fast. He wasn't going to let the momentum die. He called for a company waste emergency meeting, pulling in every district manager and supervisor. When they entered the room, there was no handshaking or laughter, just a quiet sense of reckoning. Daniel stood alone at the front. No slides, no warm-up. I went undercover yesterday, he said simply. I worked a full shift in one of our busiest locations. You could have heard a pin drop. What I saw was unacceptable. This isn't just a one-store issue. It's systemic, and it ends today. Uneasy glances passed across the room. I saw minors working illegal hours, employees denied breaks, managers slashing shifts to save pennies at the cost of people, and I saw fear. Fear of speaking up. That's not leadership. That's failure. A mid-level manager finally spoke, hesitant. But We were told to keep labor costs down. That's how Craig wanted it. Daniel nodded once. Craig is no longer with this company, and if you share his mindset, you won't be here long either. A ripple of murmurs spread. A younger supervisor lifted a hand. So, what exactly is changing? Daniel didn't hesitate. Everything. From today forward, every location will be properly staffed. No more skeleton crews. Breaks are mandatory. If I hear of even one employee being pressured out of one, the manager responsible is gone. Using hours as punishment, gone. Silence. Then, quietly, a woman near the front nodded. Honestly, sir, that's overdue. Daniel looked around. If you have concerns, now's the time. Her voice in the back broke the quiet. With respect, it's going to cost money, a lot. Daniel nodded. Yes, but it's not a loss. It's an investment. Burnout leads to turnover. Turnover kills performance. Taking care of our people is taking care of the business. The room sat with that for a beat. Then slowly, heads began to nod. Daniel didn't waste time. Over the following week, sweeping changes took effect. New hiring programs launched. Anonymous employee surveys were rolled out to every location. Regional supervisors were reassigned. This time, their job wasn't spreadsheets. It was walking into stores, unannounced, and listening. And the results, they spoke for themselves. Customer satisfaction rose. Employee retention stabilized. But most importantly, the culture began to breathe again. Weeks later, Daniel returned to where it all began. The restaurant was alive with movement, but this time, not frantic, not desperate, just busy, healthy, whole. Caleb stood at the front register, posture relaxed, no dark circles under his eyes, no hunched shoulders, just a kid doing his job. Emily worked the fryer, her motions confident and steady, no panic, no fear, just purpose. Daniel stepped inside. Caleb caught sight of him first and approached, still a little wary but not guarded. Didn't think you'd actually follow through, Caleb said. Daniel smiled. I said I would, didn't I? Caleb nodded. Yeah, you did. Emily walked over, towel in hand. It's better now? Way better. Daniel glanced around the restaurant, taking it in. That's how it should have always been. Caleb tilted his head. So what if things slip again? Daniel's smile faded, replaced with steel. They won't. Because now, I'm watching. For the first time since they'd met, Caleb didn't question him. He just nodded, satisfied. Daniel leaned casually against the counter, watching the new rhythm of the store. The employees moved with ease, no tension, no fear. Not perfect, but human, healthy, hopeful. Caleb leaned beside him. Not gonna lie, I figured you'd show up, make some big speech, then disappear back to your office. Daniel chuckled. That's what most CEOs do, right? Emily nodded. Yeah, we've had corporate folks come before. They smile, take notes, then nothing. Daniel didn't look away. That's why I came myself. If I hadn't, I might have believed Craig. I might have let it go. Caleb narrowed his eyes. So, what about the other stores? You only saw this one. I've been visiting all of them, Daniel said. Unannounced, talking to employees, watching shifts. The patterns were the same. Bad systems, scared teams. And it all led back to the kind of management Craig encouraged. Emily crossed her arms. And managers like Todd? Daniel didn't miss a beat. They're gone, every one of them. If they broke labor laws, bullied staff, or built toxic teams, they're not part of this company anymore. Caleb raised an eyebrow but didn't challenge it. Josh walked over, wiping his hands. I'll be honest, I was worried when you fired Craig. Thought we'd be scrambling. Daniel met his gaze. Josh shrugged. Turns out not having someone breathing down our necks about labor makes it easier. We've actually got the right number of people now. Daniel nodded. That's how it's supposed to be. Josh lowered his voice. Some folks didn't like the change. The ones who thrived under Todd, they're gone too. Daniel had expected that. Some people only know how to lead in broken systems. When you fix the system, they can't keep up. Emily smiled faintly. Good riddance. Josh chuckled. That's about how most of the team felt. Daniel looked around. So, how's morale? Josh thought for a moment. Better. A lot better. People aren't scared to call in sick. No one's being guilt-tripped out of breaks. It's still a tough job. Still fast food, but it's not hell anymore. Daniel glanced at Emily and Caleb. Emily nodded. Yeah, it feels like a job now, not a punishment. Caleb leaned in, grinning. Still hate the uniform, though. Daniel laughed, his first real laugh in a while. No, Josh rubbed the back of his neck. But I gotta ask, long term? You're here now, but how do we know it won't slide back? Daniel crossed his arms. Because I'm not doing this alone. There are real systems in place now. Regional oversight, anonymous reporting, store visits. But more than that, I'm counting on people like you to speak up. I'll listen. Josh nodded. That's fair. Caleb drummed his fingers on the counter. You think that's enough? Daniel looked at him, serious now. It has to be. Caleb didn't smile, but he didn't scoff either. He just nodded, slow and thoughtful. Daniel knew trust wasn't rebuilt in a day, but it started here, in a store that had once been broken. This wasn't just about cleaning up a mess. It was about building something that could never fall apart like that again. And for the first time in years, Daniel Everett knew exactly what kind of company he wanted to run, and he wasn't letting it slip away.